For most of these recording sessions, the curtains are closed and the light panels are carefully calibrated. Well, this was one of the rare days when I actually craved vitamin D, so that there is 100% natural late morning light. Of course, as I sit here recording this voiceover, it's after 1 a.m., but that's a whole nother story. Hi, I'm Irene. Thanks for being here for Fountain Pen Refilling Day. These are not all of my pens, and neither are all of these mine. That's right, I don't normally fill up 7 pens in one go. This is a combination of a few of mine and a couple of producer Mike's. So how is this video going to go? Well, at this point, I'd already disassembled and cleaned the pens, so the first part will cover reassembly and filling. Then it'll be logging each pen and ink combination into a currently inked notebook. After jotting down a few notations, things will wrap up with a thoughtful yet casual tableau. Throughout, I will talk about the pens, the inks, and the process. Perhaps I'll even attempt to regale you with tenuously related anecdotes and non sequiturs. In the past, I didn't like using tins as pen trays because of all the rattling and rolling around, but my recent studio tidying dredged up some forgotten peel and stick cork sheets, and voila, a handy-dandy pen tray with no rattle and roll. It wasn't all happy-clappy, though, because I managed to break my blunt-tipped syringe. The rubber gasket is supposed to be attached to the inner rod, but it's now stuck inside the cylinder. Boo! I thought I could fix it with forceful shoving, but apparently that tactic only works for closets and queue lines. Or so I've heard. The first pen to the plate is the Pelikan Pelikano in the Dragon edition. That pen got its own video a couple of months ago. I think the title was, "Is this pen too goofy looking?" I think the jury is still out on that one, although there was one person who replied with a very clear and concise yes. To go with its teal-like color, I picked Pilot Iroshizuku's Syo-Ro, which translated means dew on pine tree. And since I didn't want to experience another ink spill, I brought in my orange glass votive holder as a preventative measure. If it were only a couple of pens, I would have used a syringe or an eyedropper to fill the converters directly. But with 7, I figured this would be the quickest way. Just dunk the nib, then draw the ink through the feed and into the converter. You know, like a normie. Next up is the Monteverde Ritma, the special anodized orange edition, and that's paired with Diamine's Autumn Oak. A quick note concerning the state of the channel. I realize for the past couple of weeks, there's been a focus on pens and inks. Believe me, I feel the lack of watercolor and gouache content, and it will be coming. I found that switching the camera setup between 2 desks isn't as simple as I'd hoped. So, to maximize efficiency, I'm currently creating batches of content. For instance, I just recorded maybe 6 videos worth of pen and ink footage. I'll spend some time editing, then I'll switch the camera setup and take painting footage for another batch of videos. Just sharing the plan in case anyone was wondering. By the way, that pink tray is from Daiso. It's plastic, and I believe it's a vanity accessory to be used for makeup or jewelry. I haven't seen anyone use it for fountain pens, so I'm blazing that trail. Pretty sure it comes in a light ivory color, in case pale pink isn't your thing. No, I'm not being paid to promote Daiso trays. Dude, it's like $2. Other items that come in handy on pen refill day are blue shop towels and or facial tissues. What you don't see, just out of frame, is a big plastic bucket filled with water, so I could clean the tools between the inks. That's Sheaffer's Friends of Winter pen, the Pine edition. I was going to fill it with Diamine's Earl Grey, but producer Mike said he was up for having purple in one of his pens, so I jumped on that and went with Colorverse and their purpley ink called From Cali. Okay, so that pretty pink tray with the rose design, it reminds me that Adrian Belew recorded a duet with David Bowie back in 1990 for Belew's album Young Lions. That song is titled Pretty Pink Rose. Although David wrote the lyrics, Adrian arranged the music and played the instruments. Even though Belew is successful in the music industry and well respected in the field, I get the feeling his name is a bit obscure. I get it. He has a bit of an experimental side. I'm more attracted to the melodic stuff, such as his very fine cover of the Traveling Wilburys song, Not Alone Anymore. But for some reason, it's the more raucous tracks like Pretty Pink Rose that randomly get stuck in my head. Go figure. Now we're at Fountain Pen Revolution's Himalaya pen in marbly green ebonite. I nearly selected Diamine's Salamander. It's a dirty-looking muddy gray with the barest hint of green. I expect Salamander is a tad too subtle for some people, so Sherwood green it was. I was having a hard time getting the converter more than half filled, so I resorted to the eyedropper. It's not entirely clear how it happened, but I made a mess for the second time with this particular ink. At least it was just fingers that got stained this time, not the desk. Yay! There's the Lamy Safari getting its fill of Diamine's Red Dragon. I love that pen. One of these days I want to get an aluminum version. I think it's called the All-Star. It's a step up price-wise though. Whereas Safari is priced in the 20s, All-Star is in the 30s. It looks like they have some cool colors too. And is Red Dragon not glorious? I don't usually go gaga over reds, but this one and Oxblood, also from Diamine, are two reds that I can't get enough of. Seriously, I've got the 30 ml bottles, but eventually I'll need to shell out for the 80 ml size. Moving on to the Kaweco Sport. Yes, I know other people pronounce it differently. I just like saying it this way. It amuses me. Kinda like how mini-sized fountain pens amuse me. Look, pocket pens like this one are cute, but it does bug that the ink capacity is so limited. Sure, I eyedroppered my Pilot Petite, but I'm not always that brave. So give me a full-sized fountain pen with an adequate amount of ink, because I'm not trying to stuff it in my bra strap. Going into the sport is Chung Cho from Colorverse. It's a muted, dusty sort of teal that leans toward green, and it really appeals to me. It's dark, but not so dark that you can't see the color. I remember before getting the Pilot Kakuno, I was so skeptical. People kept singing its praises. I thought, how good can a $12 fountain pen be? It's marketed toward kids. There's a smiley face on it. Well, turns out it's pretty stinking good, making it one of the top 5 pens in my current fountain pen collection. I'd used Birmingham Pen Company's sterling silver on an ink sketch, about 8 months ago. I must have forgotten how much I liked it because I hadn't used it since. So it sort of jumped out, yelling, "Me! Use me!" The Pilot converter is a little different from other types of converters. I don't recall the exact model, but to fill it, you pump it, and you have to do it rapidly to get a good fill. There's excitement in the air here because our state fair is gearing up. I know, right? It feels like someone just flipped on the pumpkin spice latte sign, and now it's already hay bales and pumpkins time. I can practically smell the corn dogs, the caramel apples, and the Kalinka piroshkis. The fair starts on Labor Day weekend, which is just a couple of days away, actually, and it runs for a little more than 3 weeks. Since we went a couple of years ago, we hadn't planned to go again for another year or two, but things can change, especially if producer Mike's kids get to visit us this September. They're all adults with busy lives and commitments, but it would make our year for sure. In fact, I'm in dire need of some liveliness. Just look at my skin there. I don't think it's ever been so pale. It's positively green. My apologies. Here I am, waving around ghoulish, bloodless hands while talking about food. Brains. Brains. My Stalogy A6 notebook, intended for personal journal duty, is now assigned to logging currently inked sessions. Because who has time to keep a personal journal? Kidding. I already know the answer. People who are good at time management. Duh. I just need to replace the sticky note to reflect the book's new purpose. Because without those stickies, there'd be ink swatches with the bill-paying records, writing samples with video upload logs, and ink doodles amongst my personal contacts' addresses. In other words, total chaos. Back to sharing my thoughts on these pens and inks. The Pelikan Pelikano writes great. Seriously, I wish all of my pens performed as well. This belongs to producer Mike, but even with its weird styling, I can totally see myself adding a Pelikano to my own collection at some point, especially with their budget-friendly price. US dollar-wise, they appear to be in the 20s, but for a little more, the up edition of the Pelikano replaces the plastic with aluminum and has a more sedate color selection. Syo-Ro from Iroshizuku. I like that it's a medium shade. I prefer dark colors in apparel and home decor, so when I first started playing with fountain pen inks, that's what I picked. But I've discovered how delightful a lighter ink can look on the page, particularly if it has shading properties. The Monteverde Ritma is a pen I'm mostly pleased with. I like the styling, especially the magnetic cap. I tend to gravitate towards lighter pens, but I have to admit there are times when I appreciate some heft. Oh, I also like the ink flow, except for the occasional inexplicable skip. Is that pumpkin puree in ink form? No, it's Diamine's Autumn Oak. But that doesn't stop me from salivating over the writing sample. Is it orange? Is it brown? Is it copper? Who knows? Who cares? It has autumn in the name. Take my money. I'd slipped that plastic writing board beneath the page for a couple of reasons. With some pens, I found myself pressing a little harder than with others, leaving impressions on the next sheet. Also, the broad nib on the Ritma meant more ink and greater potential for bleed-through, so it was just there as a precaution. However, it felt a little too hard to write on, so I eventually discarded it. Everything was going fine until I got to the Sheaffer. What a pain in the butt that was. It might be the prettiest pen I've ever handled, but it sure let me down. Hard. You know, looking at this brown desktop is making me hungry. It doesn't help that the Pelikano looks like a fish, the Ritma looks like a cantaloupe, and the Safari looks like a tomato. Speaking of food, producer Mike and I were out of town last weekend, so we took that opportunity to grab a bite at Burgerville in Centralia. It had been a while, but it was as tasty as I remembered. Sure, some grill marks would have brought it up a notch, but it was still fresh, juicy, and delicious. And I somehow managed to not drip grease down my front. I understand many of their ingredients are locally sourced, which explains why there was actual Tillamook cheddar on my Northwest cheeseburger. We didn't otherwise splurge this time, but if you want the total experience, I recommend getting the seasonal Marion Berry Shake as well. Wait, that's only available during August, and it is now August 30th. Oops. Maybe next year. The Lamy Safari is my all-around go-to fountain pen. It's never let me down, and even the fine nib lays down a fat enough line for me to easily read. I've paired it with 4 or 5 different inks with excellent results each time. I can say the same about most Diamine inks. In my experience, they're well-behaved and dependable. Plus, it didn't hurt that most of the Diamine bottles we purchased were discounted. When I first got the Kaweco Sport, I wasn't thrilled that it had an extra fine nib, but it actually works for me, since it writes more like most fines I've come across rather than extra fine. Okay, I took a moment to snarf a Little Debbie oatmeal cream pie. I should be good now. Love the Kakuno, but I've already gone over that. I do want to reiterate how nice Birmingham's sterling silver is. You could call it silver, you could call it gray, you could even call it purple. Not everyone gets excited over colors like this, but I find it very interesting, and even a bit thrilling to pair it with my Kakuno. That's the cost of revolving your entire life around your YouTube channel. I did, indeed, forget about the Himalaya from Fountain Pen Revolution, so that entry ended up on another page. I could have fit it all on one page if it hadn't been for that troublesome Sheaffer Friends of Winter. Dag nabbit. The Himalaya was one of those pens that got forgotten in the shuffle, so while demonstrating it here, I was pleasantly surprised by how well it wrote. It's not one of my best pens, but it's not getting kicked to the curb either. I'm happy to share this fountain pen refilling experience. If you are even partially happy to have watched it, please hit like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment. Tappity tap, clickety click, easy peasy. Until next time, remember, life's too short for leaving your pens high and dry. At the very least, fill those babies up and start doodling. As they say, a doodle a day keeps the doldrums away. So stay artsy, my friends, eh? Wow, that was bad. It's 2 a.m. Don't judge. Don't judge.